today's session, you have presenting myself, Grantley Smith. I'm Senior Director of Sales over here at Dev Analytic 365, and Mo, who is our Senior D365 Architect, who knows way more about licensing than I do and will carry most of the conversation for me. So thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Bear with us. This is our first time using the Learners platform. So if we make any mistakes or hiccup, bear with us. But all right. So a very quick introduction to ourselves. We're a Microsoft solution partner. We've been doing this for over a decade. We specialize in Microsoft business applications, so F&O, CE, and the surrounding technologies that go with that. So anything to do with Power Platform, anything to do with data analytics, anything to do with AI, anything that has to do with Fabric, but we concentrate primarily on the business applications. As an organization, we are very, very proud of our integrity and our people. And we make sure that every single thing that we do from a project perspective is delivering actual impact to your organization. So we're not about technical config alone. We're not about just getting through the project alone. We're about actually making sure that at the beginning of every engagement, whatever it may be, that we set ourselves up for success and we set you up for success, and we make sure that we are able to measure that success at the end of the project to know that we've achieved what we set out to achieve. We have a few Microsoft designations across the bottom of the screen. We are a Microsoft solutions partner in 3 different disciplines right now. Business applications, which is today's topic of conversation, digital and app innovation, and also data and AI. So we've got all of the designations that support our areas of focus. Today's topic, licensing made easy. Also something that we'll be covering in person in a couple of days' time. If you're in the Toronto area or already been to one of the Dynamics Con regional road shows, we'll be continuing to deliver these sessions on an ongoing basis because it's a hot topic right now for Microsoft and therefore for everybody who's running F&O. Quick agenda. We'll give you a quick introduction to how this happens, how it comes about, what it is and why you care. And then Mo will carry us through the body of the presentation today, the overview of how licensing works, what enforcement means to you, how to stay compliant, how to manage your budget, and what your options are from a license acquisition or a license renewal standpoint. And then we'll close out with any questions that we've not been able to deal with during the course of the presentation itself. But as I said, please feel free to throw them in the chat. One of our moderators will draw our attention to it if we cannot see the screen because we're presenting. Thank you. So very quickly, licensing creep and compliance. What happens? Well, I liken this personally to my TV subscriptions and my streaming subscriptions. So you start off with one subscription, you've got one licensing model, you know exactly what you've signed up for, exactly what you're getting, and it's all straightforward. And then along the way, you add some more channels, you add some additional streaming services, and each of those comes with a different set of rules and a different set of licensing agreements, believe it or not, depending on how you subscribe to it. So we add all of these different services, we make these changes along the way, we maybe remember 2 years from now why we signed up for one of these, what particular show we were planning on watching, and if we finished watching it, why have we still got the subscription? Was it temporary? Was it a permanent addition? And before you know it, you've got multiple accounts with multiple streaming services with different rules around each of them. So different accessibility rules, different security models, different user counts, different permissions. And then somebody comes along and changes all of that. So Microsoft is coming along and changing all of that for you by enforcing the optimization that they have. So this is very much exactly what happens at home. It's exactly what happens with my services and exactly what Microsoft is also now doing by bringing in the rules for license compliance. So let's look at that in real terms. What happens? There are many different ways that your licensing in F&O creeps, changes, modifies over time that causes you to need maybe more licenses than you should have, not enough licenses. So the easy ones, license count doesn't equal user count anymore. Things have changed. It's been many years since you first implemented F&O. The organization has changed. people have changed, people come and go, licenses are still active, users aren't removed from the system. User permissions change over time. Somebody goes on vacation, you need to cover their position for a week, for a month. You make some changes to security, you never get around to changing them back. So now you've got users with access to potentially parts of the application that they needed temporarily, that they don't need anymore. Things change. There are simple compliance errors. What's happening with pretty much every single F&O organization right now is that according to their dashboard, they need way more licenses to be compliant based on their security model than the licenses they currently have. That's happened because Microsoft has not been forcibly making sure that everything matches. So licensing has crept, and now all of a sudden your dashboard says you need to triple the number of licenses you have based on the way you're currently set up. A lot of the causes of that are users having licenses they don't need. We gave someone access to one window in supply chain, but they're a finance person and they don't really need that window in supply chain. There are other ways of dealing with that problem, but we gave them access to it because it was fast. And now all of a sudden, on renewal, they're going to need a supply chain license. So there are a number of different ways that licenses creep, that licenses fall out of compliance, and up until your next renewal date, that hasn't been a problem because it's gone unmonitored and unregulated. But now it is going to be regulated, it is going to be enforced. And when Mo gets into the details of the presentation, you take a look at that dashboard for the first time and look at what your license renewal count is, it will probably scare you, and you'll probably wonder how on earth that happened when you thought you'd bought enough licenses originally. Well, this is exactly how it happens. So what I would like to do now, and I am going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to our lead for this presentation. I will stop sharing my screen, and Mo is going to take you through the balance of that agenda. What does it mean? What does it look like? How do you control it? How do you get it back under control? And what are your options from a purchasing standpoint?
All right. Thank you very much. Currently, am I audible to everyone?
Well, to me,
okay, perfect. If I'm not, please just raise your hand or just type in the chat so that we adjust things accordingly. So yeah, just very quick introduction of myself. I am Mo. I have been working in D365, Dynamics 365, finance and operation for over 12 years. Prior to that, I've been doing quite a lot of work on Dynamics 365 CE. And, prior to that, also a lot of development work. So yeah, it's been a pleasure to work with Dynamics 365, alongside folks like Grantley. Recently, as you've heard about Microsoft changing their licensing validation techniques or rules. And, we thought it's a great idea to come back once again, talk about this licensing. For some of you who have been, following me on LinkedIn and other social channels, I've been doing quite a lot of work in this area. And, we have also had the pleasure of helping quite a few people, quite a few clients actually to optimize their licenses, stay compliant. And then, in their contract renewal, they're in a much better position than if they have not done the exercise with us. So before we get into the details of how the enforcement is going to affect you, or how actually the enforcement works in general, we would like to get some basics in place. And then we'll get into more details about how the enforcement works, how you can stay compliant, and so on and so forth. D365 licensing in general, you have more than 7 different type of licensing, or license types that you can get assigned to. And that licensing really differs on the level of access that you need in D365. Some of them are straightforward. If you are a finance person, AR, AP, a director of finance, a VP of finance, so that finance license is for you. Then there's the SCM.
Mo, sorry to interrupt. Your screen is not shared. Would you please share your screen?
Oh, sorry for that. All right. Yeah. So as I said, we have 7 different type of license types, and depending on your level of access, you could get assigned one or the other. Obviously, there are different costs associated with each of these license types, as well as different accesses. So for these reasons, you would want to get assigned a different license. Additionally, Microsoft, they divide them into three basic types. So one is the two basic types, actually: user licenses and device licenses. Device licenses is everything that you need when you're on the warehouse floor. You don't need to assign a license to every warehouse worker. You could actually assign a license to a device. This will not be the subject of our presentation today. What we're going to be focusing mainly today is the user licenses. And they're also broken down into 2 subset of licenses. One is the full licenses, and the other one is additional. So again, name additional is not really great naming, but we have looked into the literature from Microsoft side. This is the best naming we came up with. Essentially, what it means is that if you're a full user of D365, meaning you're spending a good portion of your day or of your week in D365, you most likely need to have a full license. And again, depending on what, as I explained earlier, what your area of expertise is, you will get assigned a different licensing. Some of you might not have some of these licenses. If you don't have the commerce module, you won't see and you won't need or you won't see any of these licenses. If you're not using the HR module, again, that's the same thing. Or if you're not using the project module. What we have seen is at least 80% of our customers, they have either finance or SCM. And then when it comes to additional licenses, you do have these other 3 types. We often see that people have team members and operation activity, and it happens sometimes that you don't have any HR self-service because you're not using D365 for HR. Additional licenses are limited access to the system, and they are much cheaper. So I'll talk about the cost in a bit. So yeah, at a high level, user licenses are divided into full licenses and additional licenses. When it comes to also licensing, there's a concept of base plus attached that you have to be mindful of. Reason why is because when you need to have access to 2 areas of the system, let's say you need to have access to finance portion of D365 as well as SCM, you don't need to buy 2 full licenses. Meaning, if in this case, I don't need to buy one finance license for $210 and another SCM license for $210. Microsoft, they will not require you to pay 2 times $210. Instead, what they will require you is that you buy one of the licenses in full price, and the other ones you buy as an attached license, essentially at a cheaper price. Reason why is Microsoft want to encourage your user to actually access more, have more accesses and sell you more licenses. But what it helps is that they will actually give you an economy of scale. So the more you add, the less expensive it becomes. So just to explain that to you again, if you're a user that needs to have access to the finance module as well as SCM, in this case, you'll pay $210 for your finance full license, and that will become your base license. And then your SCM license will become the attached one. Essentially, instead of paying $210, which is the base price, you'll pay the attached price of an SCM license, which is $30. So in this scenario, the user will have to pay $210 plus $30, which is like $240 instead of $420. As you can see here, the prices that we are shown here are all in US dollars. So if you're in a different country, that your prices might be higher or lower, as well as these are the MSRP prices. So this some people they come to us and say, hey, we never pay $210, and this is too expensive. This is the MSRP price. This is the price that if you don't get any discount from Microsoft, this is what you'll pay. Most of the time, I would say 9% of the customers we work with, they actually do get a discount on this, so you'll pay cheaper. So this is the concept of base and attach. It only is in the context of that user. So if you have 2 users, one user needs finance and the other one needs SCM, you cannot say, oh, okay, now I will assign one finance to one and attach to the other one. No, it's in the context of that particular user. if that particular user needs more than just one area of the application, they will not pay full price for all these base licenses. One will become base, and then you'll have attached. Obviously, you could have one base, but you could have multiple attached licenses. An example would be someone needs to have access to your finance, SCM, and project operations portion of the application. They don't, again, have to pay 210 plus 210 plus 135. They will pay their finance license 210. Their SCM and project operations will be both attached. So they will pay another $30, $30 for SCM as attached, another $30 for project operations attached. So total would be 210 plus 30 plus 30. In that case, it would be $270 for that particular user. So you could have more than one attached licenses, but you only can have one base license. This is just to give an idea of if someone has a finance license, how much you will pay for the finance. So this is you have a finance license as base. If you add any of these licenses, a commerce or a human resource or a project ops, this is the price you will pay. So essentially, for that person, let's say they need to have finance plus commerce, they will pay 210 plus 30. If they need another HR, they'll pay another 30, and so on and so forth. Then we go to the second portion, the second type of user licenses, which is the additional licenses. These are for users that are only looking into system from time to time. That could be for approving timesheets, for doing their timesheets, for looking into records and running some reports in a read-only mode. If you don't have to have write access, you don't need the full license. So these are really these scenarios where you will think of that user to only need an additional license. Obviously, for cost reasons, you want to have more users using additional licenses than full licenses, because in that case, it will become much more interesting from a cost perspective for you, your licensing cost. Very quickly on what these are. HR self-service license. This is normally for employees to go in and do their invoice, vacation entry, absence entry. If there is any benefits that you configured in your D365, they can take a look at all those information into D365. And anything related to HR, obviously. Team member is the one that is very interesting, and when we do license cost optimization for a lot of our clients, this is the first thing that we bring to their attention, is you have to make use of this team member as much as you can. Why? Because the price of a team member is considerably lower than a full license. What you can do with that, and we'll get to that pricing in a bit, but what you can do with a team member, you can actually do some write capabilities such as expense entry or updating contacts in your D365. Additionally, if you want to have a read-only access to data, you don't need a full license. And this is really one of the most important takeaways that I would like you guys to have from this presentation, is that if someone says, hey, I just go in and run a report every week or even every day, okay, fine. You don't need to have access to a full license. You can get away with team member. If then they say, oh no, but then I go ahead and add some lines and some vendors and then so on and so forth, then yeah, obviously team member will not be sufficient in that case. The next one is operations activity. It actually includes everything the team member has, plus some additional write capabilities. And that would be, let's say you want to create a vendor or you want to create an invoice. Anything like that, you can do with an operations activity. So the question here is that if operations activity gives me those type of accesses, why do I need a full license? There are a few scenarios where you still need a full license. And one of the main ones is that when you want to do posting. So you can create a vendor, you can create an invoice, but if you want to post it, then you need to have a full license. And that becomes really the line where you would be upgraded to a full license, as we talked about here. So the next slide is just about costing. As you can see on the right, HR self-service only costs $4. Team members is $8. Operations activity is $50, and HR project operations $135 each. SCM, finance, commerce, they are $210. And finally, SCM Premium, Finance Premium, they are $300. I'm not going to talk extensively about this because not a lot of people use these, even though Microsoft started bringing them more and more into their conversations, especially with new features that are being released with Microsoft. They require you to have at least 10 SCM Premium or Finance Premium licenses. But what I would like to show you on the left is that the more accesses you want, the more expensive it gets to have the license. So as you can see, HR self-service is very limited. It's only $4, but it does give you a little bit of access to some stuff. Team member will have everything HR self-services has, plus some additional capabilities. And mainly, again, team member, if you need read-only, you can just get away with team member. Operations activity is everything team member has, plus some write capability. So you can create, edit, update records. And then finally, you go to that big category of full licenses that includes finance, SCM, commerce, project ops, and HR, where you could actually have access to a specific area of the application with the capability of doing everything you want within that module, including posting and everything else. Very quickly on device licenses, the reason why you want to buy a device license because you want to save costs. Instead of, if you have 3 users using the same device on your warehouse floor, you don't need to actually get 3 licenses for each user. If they're using the same device, you'll get a license for the device, and then, they can share it between themselves. A device license, obviously, will run the warehouse application. It does have some limitations in what it can and cannot do. But eventually, it costs you $85 per device per month. One good news here is that device licenses are not part of enforcement. We'll get to that in a bit. But if you have devices on your shop floor and you're concerned that maybe you have to buy additional licenses, and the last thing you want is that Microsoft come in and say, hey, half of these devices are not licensed and they cannot be used. So that will not be applicable just yet. Even though our recommendation to all our clients is if you need additional licenses, device licenses, go ahead and procure them and assign them to those devices. So I'm going to skip this question, obviously, because I'm not in presentation mode, and the answer is clear. Which one is true about attached licenses? A user can only have attached licenses, no base licenses. Obviously not. If you have attached licenses, an attached license assigned to, it means that you already got a base license. I'm going to go C and D. So attached licenses can be shared between users. No, you cannot have an attached license shared. Licenses are really per user, so there's no concept of sharing. Attached licenses include more features than base licenses. That's not true either. They normally contain more because that user needs more accesses. That's why you're attaching those licenses to them. But it's not true that they might have more features. And obviously, the right choice is that at least one base license is required before adding attached licenses. So with that being said, we are going to go ahead and talk about license enforcement. This is a change in Microsoft license validation policy. Basically, up until last year, Microsoft, they were trusting customers with their reports of the necessary licenses they need. They were not going in and they were not doing a hard enforcement on what you are actually consuming. So Microsoft, starting this year, and I'll get in a bit, they actually ask you, everyone, all customers, that you have to look at the report in Microsoft PPAC. You have to buy licenses according to that report. If you do not buy that, you're going to be in trouble. So that enforcement for D365 finance and operations, and I emphasize on this, this is not applicable to anything else other than the finance and operations, has started in 2026. When it's going to be applicable to you is actually at your renewal date. What it means is that not all customers are going to get this new policy of Microsoft imposed on them on the same date. It's going to be actually different dates based on when your contract is up for renewal. And that you can easily ask your procurement department or your IT department, hey, well, when's my licenses due to renew? That's a date you want to really, really keep in mind. And you want to make sure you are compliant by that date. If you're not compliant, meaning if your users are using licenses that are not purchased, or you do not have those licenses yet, Microsoft will only give you a 15-day grace period, and then afterwards that user will not be able to log in. Their access will be blocked. You do not want that. We are working with customers with over 3,000, 2,000, 3,000 users. If you don't have the right license, you will get half of your company literally not able to work, because your ERP, the core of your enterprise. So you really do not want to hit the 15-day grace period. You do not even want to hit the renewal date before you're all good. What we recommend is at least 30 days before, and that's the 30 days that Microsoft give you for a warning that they provide to you. It's in two forms: in the form of an in-app warning notification, as well as an admin email sent to your admin, Microsoft admin, your admin in Microsoft Admin Center. So you really want to make sure that you are compliant as soon as possible, so that if you have any complications, going into Microsoft, because you're going to go to Microsoft and say, hey, I need to buy more licenses. There is a procurement lead time, right? You cannot just ask Microsoft and they provide it to you next day. Those contract negotiations, those contract detailing and all that takes a lot of time. So you really want to take as much time as you can before you hit that drop dead date. There are some exceptions to this rule. Very quickly, if you have a system admin access in D365, system admin security role, you do not, this enforcement will not be applied to you. There's an exception here. If you have customized sysadmin, and we've seen in rare cases where, a company went in and the client actually customized sysadmin, which is hugely against the best practices. But if you have done that, again, you're against best practice, and then you will also require a license. If you have external guest users, like companies, like partners like us, working with you, if that user is in your production environment, which is again not a good practice to have a guest user in your production environment for many reasons, security and so on and so forth, they will be exempt from this role. Device users, as I said, exempt. Non-prod users, your users in UAT, you can add as many users you want in your UAT sandbox environment, development environments, the UP, the two, PPAC based environments. You do not need to worry about that. The enforcement will not apply to them. And eventually, if you have service accounts, so if you're integrating your D365 with an external system using a service account, you don't have to worry about the license for that service account yet. So this is really what's important. This is, these are not applicable. The enforcement is not applicable to these users yet. For service account, device users, guest users, non-prod users, and sysadmin, it might be in the very near future that you have to have actually the right level of license. A system admin might not be the case, just because you do want to have some people that can go in without having a license. So that might stay like that. But for the other ones, especially device users, non-prod users, and service accounts, you want to make sure that you do get the licenses for them. How can you stay compliant? As I said, we have helped quite a lot of clients, in the past year, and even prior to that, we worked with quite a few clients to see how they can properly configure their security roles and licenses. But this is a high-level algorithm that we have come up with for our users, where we just tell them, hey, this is what you have to do if you want to stay compliant. If you want to just buy the licenses, or you want to have already licenses, this is what you use. So normally what the system that you will use, the reporting tool that you will use from Microsoft, is PPAC and LCS. First thing you do, you go on PPAC, you look at license usage report, you see how many available and assigned licenses you have. This is really step one. Take a look at that report. Take a look at users with unassigned licenses, and then find out which licenses you need for those people, based on this report. Do you have users that don't have the valid licenses? If the answer is no, your license is compliant. If the answer is yes, you do have users with invalid licenses, then you have to either purchase them or you have to go ahead and just assign them. So if you don't have them, obviously you have that purchasing step to do. And then you go to Microsoft Admin Center, and then you do the assignment of the missing license to that user. And then for your user, you're compliant for that user. So in short, go to PPAC, check how many users don't have the right licensing. Then if you don't have those licenses that are required, buy them. If you already have them, just assign them in Microsoft Admin Center. So really, it's a very straightforward PPAC and Microsoft Admin Centers are the two tools that you're going to be using for this. This is just to give you an idea how it looks when you go to PPAC. Step number one. Here you will see how many users in total need licenses. So total user needing license. And here you see how many users are under license, and how many users are needing to pay attention. These are the users that don't have any license, and these are the users that have a license, but it's not enough to perform their job. I want to emphasize in that last part is that how do Microsoft know which licenses do you need? It's based on your security roles. The more the roles you get assigned to in D365, the bigger or the more powerful license you need to have for those. So really there is a direct link between your security roles and your licenses. If you change someone's security roles, their licensing will change, and you have to really keep that in mind. And that's how this report is built. How Microsoft know how many licenses you need is based on the security roles that are assigned to the users. How do they know they need a license but they don't have it? Again, based on security role. So that's really something that's extremely important to keep in mind. So yeah, step number one, PPAC. In PPAC you have, if you click on the users that are requiring license, you would see what are the missing licenses. You can also take a look at what Microsoft is suggesting for that user. So in this case, say, hey, your user need a finance base and supply chain attach, or a supply chain attach and a finance supply chain base and finance attach. So in this case, Microsoft say you can pick any of these, and it will make that user compliant. This goes back to the concept of base and attach, as we talked about it earlier. So really, when you are in here, if you want to know, okay, now I see that I need a finance and supply chain, but which one should be base and which one should be attached, that's how you will know. And in this case, Microsoft, they actually give you an option which one you can pick from. Finally, once this user needs these licenses, base and attach, you go to Microsoft Admin Center. This is the screenshot from Microsoft Admin Center. I'm picking, in this case, the user. I go to licenses and apps and just assign them the licenses that they need. Again, if you need a base and attach, you'll see both base and attach here, so you can assign them like that. Instead of going to PPAC, there's an alternative, for step number one we talked about here. Instead of going to PPAC, you can also go to LCS. Microsoft, they made the same report available in LCS. As many of you might already know, LCS is to be deprecated by the end of the year. And you have to migrate out of LCS very soon. But if you don't have access to PPAC, you can actually look at the same report in LCS. You just go to user license consumption, and you can see the same report. I'm not going to go into details, but yeah, if you don't have access to PPAC, that's an alternative. There's another place also where you can see the licenses that are required. It's within D365 web interface, where all end users will log in. If you go to role licenses, you will actually see which role needs which license. And that's an extremely interesting, addition that Microsoft had in the past year, to help customers understand what are the roles and what are the licenses that they need for those roles. as I talked to you earlier, security roles are tied directly to your licenses. So if you want to see which license my role requires, or which licenses it could be multiple licenses that a single role could require, you could actually take a look at here. This is a little bit tricky to read, this screen. As you can see here, it says inventory accountant clerk has some permissions. Some of them are entitled by commerce. Some of them are by finance, this column here. Some of them are by the HR, so on and so forth. So these are all the license types. You want to look at the one, the license type that has 0 in not entitled. That's how you know which role, which license can satisfy that role. In this case, as you can see, if I want to assign the security role inventory account clerk, I have to assign a supply chain management only role. That's license is the only license that actually provides all the permissions to all the menu items or all the objects within that role. This is pretty important. I'm not going to go into details because it's really time consuming, but this is really one screen in D365 that you definitely want to make sure you understand and you properly analyze. There are some other screens, I'm not going to go through them. It talks about, the user entry points, whether the license is required and so on and so forth. Very, very useful, the security analysis page for, any type of analysis you want to do. Again, the big concept is that your security roles is tied to your licenses. So you really want to understand how your security roles are requiring you more or less licenses. And there's also this security role maintain, that allows you to, to create a recording in D365. And then based on the recording, it will tell you actually what licensing that user needs. Very interesting feature. Again, I'm not going to go into details so much. There's another also screen in security role governance. The new feature that Microsoft added is the one that gives you actually the ability to assign a role temporarily to someone for a period of time, and then the end time, when the end time happens, that role will be actually removed from that person. So very interesting in scenarios where you have month end, if you have a legal entity integration into D365, you only need someone to access the system and configure it for a week or so. You can do this temporarily role assignment as well. Again, since I'm not in full presentation mode, that you already see the answer. But if you have a CFO who spends their time sipping coffee, reviewing shiny dashboard, and occasionally hitting the approve button on budget plan workflows, what type of licensing you need? Interesting. Most of people say, oh, he's a CFO, he has to have the highest level of access possible, and so on and so forth. So we're going to give him a finance because he's a chief finance officer, or we're going to give him a full, whatever access. No, it's not the case. If all he does is approving a workflow, you can get away actually just with a team member. And again, keep in mind, a finance license MSRP is $210. A team member is $8. So you're literally going from $210 to $8 and making $202 saving per user per month. A 3-year contract, 12 months a year, 100 users, you do the math. It's just the saving you can actually do is huge. So far we talked about how you can stay compliant. The next question is that, hey, I can stay compliant by purchasing licenses, right? I can always go to Microsoft and say, hey, according to my PPAC report, I need to add another 500 licenses, which translates into $300,000 a year. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, all of a sudden out of nowhere, I'm not going to add another $500,000 or $300,000, whatever, to my D365 licenses. So the next question that comes to mind is, so how can we stay compliant, right? The key is, again, the link between security role and licenses. You cannot just downgrade a user's license without changing their security role. And if you change security roles, you're going to impact their licenses. So what you want to really focus on is your security roles. This is a process that we have followed with many of our customers, and we are presenting it here just because it has worked. We have gained hundreds of thousands of saving annually. Again, it's a subscription that you have to pay annually based on this algorithm, and you really want to use this as much as you can, just because we have used this recipe many times. As I said, the link between your security role and your licenses is really crucial. So you really want to understand what are those security roles that are costing me a full license plus an attach. They're costing me $300 for that user to have the required license for that role. What we do in our exercises, number one thing we do is that we do an environment review. We take a look at your UAT environment with recent data, of course. We look at the high impact roles. What's a high impact role? A high impact role is a role that if you optimize it, it will actually make the maximum gain in licensing costs. So the concept is easy. Do I want to spend the time to analyze a security role that only needs a team member license? Of course not, because what am I going to do, right? It's team member is $8. That's almost, unless I downgrade to HR self-service, but that's pretty much the bare minimum that I can get. What you want to focus on is what are the roles that if I optimize them, that user will go from $300 license cost per month to $50, or even better, to a team member, which is $8. So really identifying those is really crucial. And we have a set of script that we run. We go through everything. It's not really that complicated. No, we only have a script because we have applied it to so many customers. But that's really the key when you are trying to do the analysis. The first step is that what are the roles that I can find? If I change their structure, I'm going to make a considerable gain in licensing costs per users. And one more time, if you have to spend $500,000 worth, $5,000 to gain $5,000, you might as well just go and buy the licenses, right? Because there's no business case. But if you say, hey, I'm going to spend 100 hours, that is the equivalent of $5,000, and I'm going to actually downgrade 200 users from a base license to a team member, that means I'm going to gain probably annual licensing is going to go down by $100,000. So obviously there's a business case to do that optimization. So really security analysis is pretty important. Then what we do is that we put together all our findings. We present it to the client. You could do this internally. Obviously, your client, it will be your end users. You want to make sure they understand the changes that you're about to do. Because last thing you want is that say, hey, I'm going to change your role. As part of my changes, you will no longer have access to the screen. You have to go to that other screen. And the person would say, whoa, hold on a second. What are you talking about? I'm not going to change the way I work. This is the screen I'm comfortable with. This is where I'm going to work with. Push back. No way I'm gonna change my habits. Fine. If user is so happy with that, screen that he's using and he has zero flexibility, you might want to drop that. But you really want to get that acceptance from your users that what you're doing is actually not impacting their day-to-day, and it's not going to make it frustrating for them. So once you get that validation, it's only then that you're going to go ahead and build the roles. And building the roles, the new roles basically, is extremely important to be done in a UAT environment. Changes to security are very, very easily propagating to a lot of users. So you don't want to go ahead and say, you know what, I'm just going to remove this from this role, or from this duty, or from this privilege. Well, you could affect 90% of the users if you change that security privilege, because it's assigned to many duty or many roles that you're using, and those roles are assigned to many users. So you really want to, testing what you're building is extremely important, because one change could actually trigger impact on multiple users. Obviously, after build user acceptance testing, you want to make sure that you're not doing changes to your product environment before your users are accepting all the changes. And then you want to have the final approval. You deploy, production deployment, and then, as you can see, this is a cycle. This is a never ending. You always want to make sure you have you keep this in mind so that you don't creep back to where you were. One point here I would like to mention is this, the deployment rollout. It's extremely important that when you deploy changes to your production, you do not overwrite or you do not delete the roles that you already have. Why? Because if your change, there's a bug in what you have developed, you go to prod and oh my God, Monday morning people come back, no one can log in because they don't have the right license. Hey, we have to roll back. Well, if you have to roll back, you have to do another deployment. What does that mean? Another day or two, another approval cycle, and it might take a week before we can bring things back. You really want to have a very quick deployment rollout strategy and rollback strategy so that if anything goes wrong, you will roll back to your previous state within minutes as opposed to days. So there are techniques that we also apply here so that we always have that rollback strategy. Because again, changes to security propagate to all users very easily. So unless you're really certain what you're doing, and there isn't any widespread change that you're doing, you always want to have a proper rollback strategy. I'm short in time, so I'm just going to go very quickly over this. These are some tricks that you can use, to cost licenses. To save license costs. We'll send you this deck later on so you can use it. We recommend not to use out of the box roles as is, because there are many issues that we've seen arise from them, especially if you talk about SOX compliance. That's another issue. If you want to be suppression of duties is a big deal for you. Out of the box roles are not compliant with SOX. I'm gonna skip over these. These are very interesting, techniques that we apply, and unfortunately, I don't have time. We don't have time today to go over them. One point that I want to get to in 2 minutes only is when you buy licenses. If you're in Microsoft, if you're a Microsoft EA agreement, enterprise agreement, that's not your only options. You actually can go ahead and buy licenses from a partner. And there are some advantages when you go with a partner as opposed to Microsoft. Again, if you're a big customer, if you have already huge investment in Microsoft technologies, EAs and MCAEs tend to be cheaper. And overall, you deal with Microsoft directly, so you do have a Microsoft representative and account manager that just helps you more. The problem with EAs is that they are only 3-year or 5-year agreements. You cannot buy yearly. And what you can do, you can always buy more, meaning you can true up your licenses, but you can never true down. You can never go back to Microsoft and say, hey, by the way, I thought I need 1,000 licenses. I only need 700. Well, sorry, you're bound to your contract for 3 years. You cannot just go from 1,000 to 700. CSPs are more flexible. They could be more expensive, potentially, not always, but they do provide plans for monthly and yearly, and this is really where it becomes interesting. Just a quick comparison on EA versus CSP, and in terms of flexibility and so on and so forth. I talked about this already. So yeah, takeaways is that EAs are lock the client down for long term, potentially with better pricing and with price guarantee. They won't have true down. CSP is better for license optimization, scaling down, and piloting changes. So if you think, okay, right now I don't have the time, but I don't want to optimize, but I don't want to also, commit to a 3-year contract, you can go with a CSP, buy, 1 year worth of licenses, and then by the end of next year, you already optimize and you can go to Microsoft and renew for another 3 years. So yeah, that's a high-level comparison between the two. With that, I'm gonna pass it to Grantley for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much for that, Mo. Thank you everybody for joining us for this session. So I'd just like to wrap it up for you today, and then if we have time, we'll take any questions that I have managed to get to in the slides. So just very quickly, if you have any takeaways from today, I would suggest that the first thing to do is understand your deadlines. So know when your license anniversary, when your renewal is, and then start thinking about when you need to begin these activities, security audits, in order to avoid any business disruption on the day that your anniversary hits. As Mo has said, you'll get warnings start to pop up in the system. There is a very short grace period following the anniversary, but you need to start working backwards from that deadline and figure out when you need to start this. We recommend at least a month to 2 months in advance. Our process is pretty streamlined, but then putting the changes into effect, especially if you're changing roles and you're taking access to certain screens away from users, that requires adoption, that requires testing. So make sure you've got enough time to do all this before that renewal date hits. Otherwise, you're stuck with the licenses that you have. Do your homework. Get ready up front. Do as much preparation as you can. Make sure you know what your employee counts are, what your access counts are, what your current license assignments are. Make sure you've gone through your role definitions as best you can do, and you know that how many of those you're potentially looking at. Again, all things that we can help with our process, but make sure you've got as much homework done as you can before you start, because it'll only help speed things up. And then very quickly, if you'd like to, we actually have an assessment online that will allow you to very quickly test the waters and see what your current scenario is like and how exposed you are. So please feel free to follow that and take our quick online license assessment. A couple of quick success stories for you to share from things that we've seen in the past. We had a customer with over 2,000 active users, $3.5 million in annual licensing costs, and were non-compliant with the enforcement that was upcoming. We did the full license review with them in just under 4 weeks, identified the users that were under over licensed, any compliance gaps, and completed a SOX check as well. So we made sure that there was regulatory compliance. And at the end of that, we actually managed to reduce their annual spend from 3.5 million to 1.1 million annually, and got them fully compliant. There was no disruption to business. Nobody was shut out the system. Everybody had access to everything they needed to complete their day-to-day activities. And we saved them 2.4 million a year in the process. Another quick one for you, just before we go, much smaller organization, only 200 odd active users, around about $500,000 in annual licensing costs. Same thing. Their anniversary date was coming up. Their current status was not compliant. We took them through a slightly shorter, faster license review, didn't do the SOX stuff, didn't do so much optimization from a role and usage perspective, but we did identify the over licensed users and any gaps that there were in compliance. And we managed to cut their annual spend pretty much in half before the renewal deadline, kept them compliant and kept them operating. And that's the big one for me, is the operational disruption, more so than the compliance or the license. The cost obviously is important, but for me, it's the business disruption, because once those warning messages go away, what's going to happen instead is people are going to get locked out, and that causes business disruption. So it's really, really imperative that you get on this early and don't just look at the number and take it as absolute, this is what we have to buy. It probably isn't, but unless you go through this process, you're not going to know that, and we're not going to be able to clean it up before you get to that renewal date and that anniversary date. And then those licenses are locked in for whatever renewal term you've selected, and you can't true down after that. So thank you everybody for your attention today. Thank you everybody for the questions in the chat. I believe I've been able to get to most of them. If we've not got to them, we've got a couple of minutes left right now, and you are more than free to book a one-on-one session with us following this, and we can have a conversation with anybody one-on-one if we run out of time today. Ray, if you could put the link for booking those sessions into the chat for everybody, that would be awesome. If everybody is unmuted, or if there are any outstanding questions from the chat that I did not get to, now would be the moment. Thank you everyone for your time. We look forward to seeing you at one of our live sessions soon, hopefully. And if in the meantime, are there any other questions that we can answer? Is everybody unmuted, Ray?
Thank you, Grantley. If anyone wants to talk, please raise your hand. I'll open the microphone.
We're there.
Okay. Subramanian, your microphone is open. You have to unmute yourself.
I can do
Hello.
that. There we go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, this is first of all, thank you for the sessions. It is really helpful, insightful. We have implemented D365 finance system, and which is already live, and our license enforcement is supposed to be end of June. Um, we started reviewing this process. Um, there is one specific question that I have is, and the Power Platform PPAC portal, when the license are showing some days as a team member, and so all of a sudden it moved to activity, and we do not have clear detail around when it is getting updated, because we have not applied any updates to Microsoft, either a quality update or service update to the system, but the report get changed eventually, and then we had to do a continuous monitoring of the role to see what has changed and what object is coming from, when was it included, things like that. Is there a better way to monitor it and then identify the license that we purchased and not changing until we manually apply and enforce it?
Yeah. Do you know if those changes are for a custom role or it's an out of the box role?
No, it's a custom role created using a standard duty called the inquiry to customers masters. Inquire
Okay, so
into customer master. It's just to see the customer and its transaction and a read level. But what Microsoft has done, they've added some co-pilot privileges or something like that, and
yeah.
that was requiring right, and that has eventually changed that into an activity. So, but when we designed it as a security role, that role that duty doesn't requiring activity. It's changed after it is designed. Then
Mhm.
users are getting notification, because our users are started to get notification 30 days in advance that you do not have license, please contact admin and things like that. So then we went into it and verified, and we were assigned team member, they were assigned, they were requiring an activity and things like that.
Yeah, so we had that case where one customer also had the, they came back and say, hey, Copilot was added. So what we recommended them immediately is just because it was a custom role, we just asked them, hey, go ahead and remove that permission from the role itself as a immediate fix. And then we asked them to create a ticket with Microsoft. So essentially, that was a bug from Microsoft when they updated one security role. And that was not part of an update. That was actually a PQU, that proactive quality updates that triggered that. So unfortunately, there is no way, if your question is to detect that automatically. If a user gets that, notification, they'll have to just inform you. The promise we got from Microsoft is that those changes are going to be included as part of the release notes. They are not going to happen. They're not supposed to happen like that. No changes that Microsoft do to the system in terms of PQUs or service updates, they should not trigger any license change.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's what they got. Otherwise, we asked him, like, guys, what are you doing in the back end, and what if something triggers you change a duty or a privilege, not even a role, right? Because you could have a custom role, referencing duties and privileges out of the box. How can people even monitor that? And it said it's not going to happen. If ever something like that happens, it will be announced to the groups or through a release note or in the licensing guide.
Yeah, that's exactly what we have done as well. We've removed the privilege from the standard duty, and then converted into a team member again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then eventually, what we recommend to if you want to not do that change, because you don't want to customize it, because you already have like customized role, and then you have to customize a duty or a privilege. You can create a ticket with Microsoft and say, hey, this happened. If they eventually fix it, you can just revert back to that out of the box security privilege.
Okay. The other rule with the minimum license requirement. So I think Grantley already mentioned to me that you have to build up your base license in specific areas, so you don't have to buy like minimum 20 quantity requirement against project and things like that. So let's say we have 55 users, 30 users finance, unique users finance, and then 20 users are maybe 15 users are SCM, and then 10 users are just project. And with that, we had a requirement when we raised in a license proposal with Microsoft. Microsoft said any license that you buy as a base license, it has to meet minimum 20. uh, Else you need to group it against some of the SCM or finance licenses against the project. Is it so? Then when we purchased it and when we assigned the roles, assign the licenses against the users, in the PPAC portal it shows over licensed for those project only users. When we assigned SCM base and the project as an attach, it says over licensed. So then are we really requiring to buy, or we purchased it incorrectly?
What I know is that when you buy finance or SCM, sometimes Microsoft, they require 20 of each, only for finance and SCM. We have seen this in the past. And it's kind of a little bit annoying because sometimes we only have 10 people that need SCM licenses. Unfortunately, that's the rule, but it's not the case for project operations and other roles. You don't have to buy minimum number.
But they said, I think we had scenarios where we have bought 20, we have bought more than 20 for finance and supply chain, but since we're recurring only 10, they asked us to procure increase the supply chain base for those users who doesn't even have SCM. They are asking for project as well.
So they're imposing a minimum of 20 for project ops as well?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard that. I haven't seen that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, those could be specifics. Are you directly with Microsoft, or are you buying through a CSP?
Yeah, we are buying through a CSP providers, and we have our unified contract with Microsoft. So Microsoft is also engaging us in reviewing the numbers that we provide and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if that's the case, if unfortunately if Microsoft told you that that's really the best source of truth, I have definitely seen that with supply chain and finance. I thought it's not applicable to other licenses. First time I'm actually hearing that. But yeah, I haven't run into that scenario, but I don't think you have many choices, unfortunately, in that case.
Okay, sorry, one last question then I'll try. So with the license changes, right, and Microsoft mentioned that the capacity requirement against databases are converting into elastic capacities. So we would like to understand how does it will play a role in our environment. Do we have to monitor anything and pre-purchase before this cutover validation starts?
Very good question. Capacity is the next topic Microsoft are going to be enforcing. Essentially, if you're buying additional licenses, that helps you with capacity. But that's definitely something that you have to consider. Right now, if you're over, Microsoft are being easy or flexible with it. Eventually, you have to look into how you can optimize it. And we do have some customers we're working with right now, where we are actually doing their conversion from LCS to PPAC, and that's another thing that Microsoft are going to impose soon, right? It does have there is a direct link between your licenses and capacity that you get on Dataverse.
what they mentioned is that if you buy the finance and supply chain and project licenses, each of the licenses comes with them different database capacity, file capacity, and things like that.
Correct.
And your
Yeah.
performance and this and the sizing of the environment will also be changed according to the number of licenses you have. But we do not have any clear documentation around where can I look at, based on the license that I purchased, where can I look at what could be, am I approaching the capacity of the database, or am I approaching the blob
In
storage?
PPAC, you can see that. In PPAC, there's a report.
Mhm.
You can actually see how much capacity you're getting because of the number of finance licenses you have purchased, how much capacity you're getting because of the number of SCM licenses you have purchased. You get actually all that detail. If you want, you can just drop your email and I can actually send you a screenshot directly.
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We're a little bit over time. Appreciate everybody's attendance and everybody's involvement. All the links you need, all of the contact information you need should be here on the screen or posted in the chat. If you'd like to discuss this more with us, then please reach out and we'd be happy to talk to you about your specific circumstances. Mo, thank you ever so much for racing through that content as best you could do. We could talk about this, well, Mo could talk about this for much longer than we had today, but we'd be happy to pick it up one-on-one with you. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.